千里之行，始于足下。A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Derek Lin, where we take a deep dive into the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. So there's going to be a brief recap that I'll do to talk about our discussion last time, and then we'll finish everything. As I think everyone may recall by now, the title in Chinese for chapter 52 is Hold to the Mother. So this is one of the two possible Chinese titles for this particular chapter. As I mentioned previously, every chapter has a title. It has not typically been the practice previously for translators to render the chapter title. And the reason is because there's no consensus on what they ought to be. Some chapters have two titles. Nevertheless, I thought that it would be a good idea to talk about the chapter title. In some cases, they give us additional insights. This particular one, Hold to the Mother, has the alternate title, the Mother and Children chapter, where mother is the Tao and children is basically all things in creation. So we're going to be doing the same thing when chapter 53 rolls around. We'll talk about the title, we'll talk about the meaning, and I think you will also see for yourself that it gives us additional insights into what the chapter is trying to convey. So then here's where we are. We divided up the chapter into three sections. Section 1, I think everyone remembers, focuses on Tao as the source or the mother of everything. Then the second section there, basically two ideas that apply to life, that we should watch our communication with other people, watch the mouth. Then we should shut the door on temptation. And the door is associated with what we see and what we hear. In other words, the eyes and ears. Then the third section is what we talked about last time. It's a concept-heavy section in chapter 52. So we spent quite a bit of time talking about details, talking about softness, and also utilizing the light, return to the clarity. Every line contains an important concept, and we got to line 18. So we're two lines from finishing this entire chapter. So in regards to details, softness, light as in spiritual illumination, and clarity in terms of spiritual clarity, here's what we talked about before. When it comes to details, I provided some examples of why Tao cultivators regard details as being so important. So as a recap, you may recall that we talked about how big things have dependencies on small things. Big things have small beginnings, and a car is a good way to illustrate that. It contains many parts, and there are many parts that are crucial to the operation of the vehicle. If one of them were to break, the entire vehicle is unable to function as a vehicle. And we also talked about how details at the small level can provide us with insights to the larger level. And the example that I used was from Sherlock Holmes, where Sherlock Holmes illustrated the difference between observation and seeing things. We all see many things throughout the day, all the time. But Most of us do not have the observational clarity that Sherlock Holmes demonstrated when he not only saw with his eyes, but also observed with his reasoning faculties. And that was the lesson that Holmes had for Watson. Lastly, one more example is that a lot of times something that you may not think is a big deal can be huge for someone else. And the example that I used was a shy girl who, upon being complimented by her teacher while very young, it basically set her life on a course to become a writer. It is what she enjoyed the most. It shaped her entire life. It was just a few words of encouragement from the teacher, but it proved pivotal for her. And the reminder there for everyone is that what we say to other people can be similar. That is, you may think about something that you tell somebody else as no big deal, as just a random remark from you, not that important. Well, you don't know that it's possible for the other person to associate life-changing importance to it. So that being the case, this happens all the time. How can we best carry out our communication with others, minding all the details? The only way is to make sure that everything we talk about is consistent with the Tao, congruent with the Tao, in the hopes that at some point, somebody somewhere will derive benefits from it so that we contribute in a positive way to the world. Last time, we also talked about the soft approach, and this is the slide that I used for the soft approach. I talked about the soft approach being different. It's refreshingly different because we look around the world, we see people going over the top, being very aggressive, pushing their agenda all the time. What a lot of people do is increase the tension and stress level in the world. We have a role to play to diffuse an explosive situation, to bring the temperature down, so to speak, to help things be a little better, a little nicer, and yes, softer for others. The second one, I say that the soft approach is relatable because it is what builds rapport. It is what connects us to other people. People can push back when you take the hardline approach. They sense aggression, therefore they resist. But if on the other hand, your approach is the soft approach of the Tao, you are much, much less likely to encounter that same resistance, that same pushback. So it is what makes friends. It is what brings you allies. And ideally, for our case, as Tao cultivators traveling on the journey of life in this sacred trust, the sacred quest through life, the soft approach, hopefully, is what will win travel companions, people who can take the road of life with us. Lastly, the soft approach is what wins respect. So the misconception, in my opinion, is that the soft is related or associated with the weak. Being soft must be weak. And I think quite the opposite. I think losing control, I think spazzing out, having a rage fit, that is a sign of weakness. Confidence, composure, the gentle approach, backed up by strength, that is where the respect is earned, because that reveals true inner strength, not the superficial strength of bluster, being a bully. So this is why Lao Tzu specifically says, holding to the soft is called strength. So the soft approach is the Tao. And then finally, the last concept that we went over last time connects the illumination, spiritual illumination, with spiritual clarity and how we can return to the original clarity. So what I said was that it's a guaranteed process. It will work because that original clarity is the state that we all started out with. It is the original true state of humanity. We all began that way. So for us to regain clarity, it is not to attain some sort of spiritual elevation. It is a return to who we truly are as beings of light, if you will. So that being the case, Tao cultivation is simply a direction, a helpful hint, a pointing of the path to engineer that return for yourself. To cultivate the Tao means that you will then better recognize the times when things are chaotic in your life, not sure what to do, starting to feel a little bit overwhelmed. That, in the metaphor that we're using, is the water becoming murky. It's getting stirred up. There's a lot of murkiness. There's a lot of mud that's been stirred up. So then, having Tao cultivation, meaning having the awareness to know that we should slow down and sometimes stop. Take a pause that refreshes. Then we need to give the whole situation, the chaotic situation, time to settle down. It's an absolute necessity. Got to give it time. Being impatient will not help. So after a while, the muddiness settles down, clarity resumes, spiritual illumination naturally shines through once again, and we have returned to the original state of clarity. So that's what we talked about before, and this is the quick recap of our previous discussion. Now, I imagine everyone, like me, would be quite eager to complete the last 2 lines worth of discussion in our presentation for this particular chapter. So let's do that. So line 18 is the next to last line, and the translation says, leaving no disasters for the self. I want to start with the very last character there, yang. Here's the pinyin for that. And what it means is disaster, calamity, a disastrous situation. So that's clear. There's no ambiguity in this particular character. It's about a bad situation, negative situation. The next to last character that you see in line 18, shen, that means the body. It means the self. When you put it in this context, it means disastrous situation for the self. And hence the translation, disasters for the self. Disasters specifically is talking about problems and difficulties that we encounter in life. Those disasters. So it's disasters in general, negative situations in general. Previous to this line, in this chapter, we talked about the problems that we cause ourselves by speaking carelessly. That's from the mouth. Or the problems we create for ourselves by interfering. And that's because we were tempted by what we see and what we hear to interfere with other people's business. So those kinds of troubles, those kinds of problems. The commonality with all of them is that we play a major role in causing those problems. And this is what the bullet point here makes clear. Like careless words or temptations or problems in general are self-inflicted. That's actually a good thing, because if the problems are self-inflicted, we also have the power to resolve the problems, to solve the problems. Now, that's easier said than done, which is why this last section is important. It's basically saying, if you look back at the previous two lines, that when you have illumination, you can see things better. When you regain spiritual clarity, you are clear as to what needs to happen, what you need to do. So let's take a look at the whole thing together. Line 18. The sequence, here's the thought process. Here's the thought process of the Tao sages as to all of these problems in life, most of it self-inflicted, what to do, what to do. So this is how you leave no disasters for the self, which, literally that means you save yourself from the disasters of your own making. Sounds funny when I say it like that, but that's actually exactly how life works. When you live long enough, when you have seen enough problems, you quickly begin to realize that, hey, I may have unwittingly caused this for myself, and I have, dug this hole pretty deep, and now I need to get myself out of it. Step one, when you have spiritual illumination, this is represented by the character Guang. And if you look at the end of line 16 in this chapter, utilize the light. Guang is the character for light. When you have light, spiritual illumination, it lights up everything in your life, physically, metaphysically. So the idea is that you can see your life in a better situation. You can perceive everything more clearly. It can shine a light, for instance, on your pursuit of material things, and then you may come upon the realization, I don't actually need that. So spiritual illumination is useful in so many different ways. And we also talked about how it lights the way so you can know which path to take in life. That is, you can make better choices in life. Now, let's stick to, saving ourselves out of the problems of our own making. Because of the illumination, you gain spiritual clarity. This is a clarity that you've always had, but that becomes obscure in your various interactions with the material world. But you still have it. It is still within. You still have the power. You just need to get your mojo back, so to speak. When you regain clarity, spiritual clarity, you are then clear on exactly how you've been the cause of your problems all along. All these years, all these issues that seemed so difficult, so challenging, your clarity shows you, hey, you had a hand in it. You were the primary cause of it. So then by the same token, that same spiritual clarity also lights the exit. It lights up the exit. It shows you the way out. It shows how you got into it, and therefore how you can back away and get yourself out of it. So that's the idea. This leads us to the very last line, arguably the most important line in this entire chapter. This is called practicing constancy. 视为习常. So this is the pinyin that you see there. Let's break it down character by character. 是, the first character, means is. And oftentimes in spoken modern Mandarin, you can also say 是 to respond yes to a question. And then 为, called, regarded as, considered to be. Then the third character, that is the character xi for practice. And I'll focus more on it. It's actually important. And then the last character, chang, constant, that which doesn't change. So practicing the Tao is what it says. To constantly practice the eternal Tao is Tao cultivation. So this is exactly how Tao cultivators are able to transform themselves through practice. Practice, practice, practice. Now, those who understand this, they all say the same thing. They all say, the Tao has changed my life. How did it change your life? Well, because I put the teachings into practice. So let me focus on practice for just a moment due to its importance. Last two characters, xi, chang. The final key to the entire chapter, the last thing that we should talk about before we go on to the paraphrase and the full circle discussion. Final key to the entire chapter. We have an expression which matches this in feeling. We say, in the West, we say, practice makes perfect. You've heard it. We use that expression all the time. Practice makes perfect. It fits into this context because what we're trying to do, our goal is to perfect oneself. It's for self-betterment. It's to attain mastery of the self or mastery of life itself. The life that the self has to live from here on out. So practice makes perfect. That's what ties together the repetition of applying the Tao to the perfection of one's spiritual self. So this particular character, xi, next to last character, this is often used in ancient Chinese and also modern Mandarin. The most often used expression, probably, wenxi. It means to review, and this is usually used in the academic context. You want to review a lesson to get ready for a test, as an example. So wenxi, the two characters here, the second character is exactly the same as what you see in the next to last character in line 19. When the first character there in wenxi is warm. So literally, it is to warm up the skill through repetition, through repetitive review, so that the skill will eventually become second nature through the process of repetition. When it is second nature, it becomes a part of you. It becomes who you are. You are unable to be any other way, but practice, but be one with the skill, that the skill is you, you are the skill, etc. So that is how Tao cultivation works. Practice, practice, practice. So let me summarize all that and talk about practice in terms of the life journey. So the graphic that I have here is just a representation of the path, going forward in the journey of life. So there are 4 key points to practicing constancy. Number 1 is to visualize this lifelong quest, this journey ever forward. It is gonna take some time. It is a process of always learning for as long as you live. So it's never going to be instant gratification. Education, it is said, is something that should never stop. Indeed, it is something that cannot stop. So instant gratification, reaching a particular goal, let's just say enlightenment, overnight or suddenly, that is likely to be a scam. So the nature of practicing constancy is that it keeps going. Number two, it is always done through everyday activities. There's going to be a lot of people in the spiritual genre who will be attempting to sell the idea of a boot camp, a seminar, and sometimes it's a pilgrimage, it's a trip, let's just say a journey to China or India or some other faraway place. That is not really the essence of the Tao. The essence of the Tao, the extraordinary Tao, is in the ordinary activities every day. So practicing constancy is done during those activities. Tao cultivation is primarily done through just living life. So just as nothing will happen overnight, it is just as true that we need to be aware that there are people out there who will, for instance, charge fees promising quick results. So just as in number one, we know that problems have been decades in the making, and therefore they won't go away quickly. There's no instant gratification. Same idea, a weekend seminar, a boot camp, these are quick things that some people may swear up and down that it's given them, major changes in life. But it is just as true that quick changes are temporary. Real changes that last require long-term commitment. Number three, practicing constancy is always about the internal. The metaphor that we used last time is minding your own drawer. You have to look at what you've got, pay attention to it, and then do something with it, rather than to pay excessive attention to the external, meaning other people's drawers. Lastly, the last point is a point that gets emphasized in the next chapter. So I'm happy we're heading into it today. So there are no shortcuts. The practicing constancy in life cultivation is always guided by conscience. It's always about doing the right thing in accordance with your highest self, with your highest level of being. It's not the expedience, it's not the convenience, it's about doing the right thing for the right reasons. So that's it with our discussion of this chapter, chapter 52. We are now ready to dive into the paraphrase. As usual, our purpose is to demonstrate understanding, and we do that by expressing the original with modern language, modern verbiage, to put it in our own words. Now, as I mentioned, the very first section is all about Tao as the mother, all of creation as the children. So that section can be paraphrased as follows. There is a beginning of everything. We call it the Tao, and we describe it as the mother of the world. What we understand about it gives us insights into its children, and its children are all things in existence, including all living things, the world, and us. The reverse is also true. Understanding the children gives us insights into the Tao as the mother, or the source. If we can hold on to the principles uncovered through this understanding, we can make our lives much smoother and easier. So this, in a nutshell, is what Lao Tzu is trying to say with this particular chapter, and then he goes on to the specifics. So everything in section 2 and section 3 tie back into this idea. How do we understand the Tao more? By understanding the children better. How do we understand the children everything? By understanding the Tao principles, the principles of the source, the principles of creation. So in the next section, there are 2 specific areas of advice. The first has to do with the mouth, and the second has to do with doors representing the eyes and ears. So here's the paraphrase for that. For example, one of the principles tells us that if we can close the mouth, refrain from speaking untruths, and shut the door on temptations, then we will have far fewer problems in life. On the other hand, if we talk too much, speak carelessly, or give in to the temptation of interfering with other people's business, then it will be quite the opposite. We will cause problems for ourselves and create situations that will seem completely hopeless. So you can see Lao Tzu getting much more specific about how to live life in a smooth and easy way. And that, by the way, continues to be his focus in 53. So there's a connecting thread through different chapters. Now the last section. The last section is what we just talked about. It contains a number of important concepts about details, about the importance of the soft approach, light, spiritual illumination, clarity, to be spiritually clear, and finally ending with the concept of practicing constancy. And the way we talk about that, of course, is practice makes perfect, especially in the process of perfecting the self. So here is the paraphrase that I would like to offer for that. Those who observe details are the ones who attain clarity. Those who hold to the gentle approach are the ones who possess true strength. These are the Tao concepts we can use to illuminate life and return back to the original state of clear purity. This is how we save ourselves from the disasters we created in our lives. It is also how we cultivate the Tao as a lifelong quest, a constant practice through daily application. So that's it on the paraphrase for 52. I would say that the one thing that stands out to me, one thing that becomes obvious upon rereading, is the emphasis that Lao Tzu had on taking charge of one's own destiny, to be very explicit in saying that, hey, listen, you're the architect of your own issues. Therefore, be the solution rather than the problem. I see that as a different mindset than the idea that I sometimes encounter in the realm of spirituality, where people insist that, no, you are a human being, you are fallible, and therefore you require something outside of yourself. You require an external power, i.e., Supreme Being, to absolve you of your sins. The paradox in that line of thinking is that if human beings are fallible, cannot be trusted, tainted by the original sin, then your decision to turn to the external power for salvation is also suspect. If everything that you think about is flawed, how do you know that you're picking the right sect to which to devote yourself. It would be better to resolve this paradox by turning it upside down, as Lao Tzu would say, and say that, and to basically trust in the innermost core that on some level, there's a part of you that knows exactly what you ought to do. You should listen to it for what it tells you is essentially the whispers of wisdom, if only you would heed its advice. Lastly, we have the full circle discussion. So the idea is simple, is to connect the end of this chapter back to the beginning, and a lot of times we find that the process will give us additional insights, valuable insights that we would otherwise miss. So in this particular case, what does the last line say? Well, the very last line, Lao Tzu talks about practicing constancy, 习常. It's a consistent practice of Tao cultivation. And Tao, of course, is the constant. It's the eternal constant. So here we're talking about the Tao practice. And here's the last to the lower right-hand corner. You'll see that's the very last part of Tao Te Ching, chapter 52. So what we want to do next is that we want to link the last line back to the beginning. So we'll do that. And there's the beginning. In the very first line, Lao Tzu talks about the world having a beginning, the Tao. And when we link it back to the end, forming the full circle, here is the additional insight. Remember, when we began talking about the Tao as the mother, we talked about all the children having the characteristic of growth, development, change. So everything that grows, that goes through a process of development and changes everything is the children. All things are the children. So then the Tao practice itself, having a beginning, is also the children, part of the children of the Tao. It means the Tao practice is something that can also develop over the course of time. It can change. You learn about certain things. Perhaps you started out with a particular translation that caught your attention, and it intrigued you. You became interested to learn more. When you dig deeper into it, you realize that some parts of the translations, may not be as accurate as you first assumed. So you dig deeper, you deepen your understanding, and you figure out eventually exactly what Lao Tzu was trying to express. And there you go. Your practice of the Tao has gone through a change. It's a living thing. So our cultivation of the Tao changes over time. It too is a living thing. The way it is right now, as we speak, your concept of the Tao has probably morphed, has probably evolved over, say, a year ago, some time ago. It is a certainty that it will continue to evolve and change as we continue on. Therefore, it being one of the children, it too has a mother or a source, and that is the Tao itself. So everything kind of ties together in a neat little package, and that's the additional insights. Practicing constancy. The practice is a living thing. It should be cherished, it should be treasured, it should be nurtured by yourself, kept alive, vibrant, and healthy. That's the final thought on chapter 52 of the Tao Te Ching. Our meeting has come to an end. but the journey continues on. Let us all travel safely so we can meet again. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.